Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please silence all phones. Our program will now begin. Please welcome to the stage Mark Miller, Global Editor of Bloomberg Live.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And welcome to Bloomberg House. Thank you for joining us for this morning tea. This is going to be our last session here at Bloomberg House, which has been an amazing week. I hope you have all had a productive week in this very tumultuous period. You can find the Wi-Fi info for Bloomberg House right behind me here. And a quick reminder that all sessions are being streamed live, so please be mindful of camera positions and noise. Silence your phones, again, please. We are, of course, active on social media. You can see the various channels we're on. Hashtag Bloomberg House, so please follow us there. And if you're not already a subscriber to Bloomberg.com, which I'm sure all of you are, but if you happen to be the one person who's not, you can try it out for free for 3 months by accessing this QR code, so please do that. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Hitachi Energy, for supporting this morning tea. You'll be hearing from them in a moment alongside Ireland's Minister of Enterprise, Tourism and Employment in a session programmed by my colleagues in Bloomberg Media. Then we'll have an interview with the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine for European and Euro-Atlantic integration, Taras Kachka. And then we'll conclude with an interview with the President of Argentina, Javier Milei. That interview will require simultaneous translations, which if you haven't gotten them, please get your headsets. And at the appropriate time, you'll select the channel that you want. Channel 1 is English, channel 2 will be Spanish. Thank you again for joining us, and let's get started.
Please welcome to the stage Peter Burke, TD, Minister of Enterprise, Tourism and Employment for Ireland, and Andreas Schierenbeck, CEO of Hitachi Energy, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Lee Gilmore.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome, as Mark said, to the final day at what has been an exhilarating Bloomberg House in a captivating week. You'll have heard this week, energy has been front and center of so many of the conversations, but often discussed from a perspective of geopolitics, of technology, or capital investment. Today, we're going to take a different tack and talk about people. In Europe, a race to replace Russian gas, an expedited rollout of renewables, and a modernization effort of the energy infrastructure could grind to a halt without the necessary workforce. And with me, I have two people best placed to talk us through this challenge. So let's dive right in. Gentlemen, given all the chatter we've heard in the mainstream media about the pivot back to fossil fuels, Andreas, as the CEO of a global energy company, what trends are you seeing in your day-to-day that confirm or reject that narrative? And how have you seen the notion of an energy transition evolve over the last few years or even months?
It's a very good question, and thanks for having me. I think the trends are clear. We all need more energy, more primary energy. And there I think the complexity starts, because if we need more energy, we talk about molecules and we talk about electrons. under the surface, I think it seems to be not so obvious, but we need much more electricity than we need the increase of primary energy. So it means the need for electricity for electrons is growing much, much faster than we have seen in the last decades. So the question is not, is it more or less fossils? The question is how we generate these electrons. And the trend of electrification, I think, is going on. You need to have data center and other drivers. So I would say it's not neither or. We need more energy, and we need definitely a big part more electricity.
Thank you. And Minister, your thoughts?
First of all, I would say we're very committed to the green transition from a European perspective, and especially from an Ireland's perspective, because we have a huge amount of opportunity in our offshore renewable energy. We have, at this point in time in our economy, we use about 6 gigawatts of energy, and we have a build out to 2040 where we have about 20 gigawatts of offshore wind, increasing to 37 by 2050. And we had a very highly successful auction on our east coast recently under our new planning and consent regime. And if I put perspectives on this, if you look from the Irish context, 2 years ago we were spending about 12.4 billion euro in our capital plan. This year we'll go up to 19. So that's about a 54% increase. And front and centre of that is taking the view that if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. And we're really focusing on housing and the enablers of industrial policy, which are energy, water, those key infrastructural pieces that will allow that transition. So it's a very exciting space. I'm working to try and commercialise the research in academia to ensure that we're getting the skills for the future that will future-proof that investment.
So, Minister, I'll stay with you for a second and stay on Europe as well. Ireland has positioned itself as a skills-driven investment hub. As Ireland takes the presidency of the European Commission in July, what do you think, which learnings perhaps could be applied to help Europe face its skills shortage? Try and say that quickly. Yeah. Skills shortage. But I'm sort of talking about what could reasonably be replicated across the EU.
Well, we have, first of all, the free movement of people through the 27 countries. But one of the big challenges from a European perspective has been administrative burdens. So one of the key things is the new Commission, when it set office at the very outset, President von der Leyen promised simpler, faster and lighter. And that's what we're really going to focus on when we take up the presidency in July, looking at how do we make Europe more simpler? How do we try and ensure that regulatory requirements are proportionate and that you have better regulation? It's not about dumping all regulation, but you need to look at the interoperability of a number of the regulators that are on the horizon. And what we look at in terms of the Union of Skills, which has been brought forward by the Commission, trying to ensure you have that lifelong learning piece, that you're really partnering and having the output from our tertiary educators that reflect a modern economy, that they are really in tune with where the demand will be in 10, 20 years' time. And that's what we're really working on in Ireland, and so many of our areas are focused on that. We're looking at a very significant digital transition, but we're trying to bring hand in glove the green transition as well, because one can very much complement the other and one can actually finance the other, which is critical and very important from our perspective.
Thank you. Going to your perspective, Andreas, where is Europe's skills shortage? So the Minister was just talking about free flow of people through Europe, which obviously is an advantage, but you are going to see, or you believe we're going to see a shortage. Where is it already constraining, hampering the energy transition? Which parts of the system are most exposed over the next 5 years, in your opinion?
It's a very good question. I think there's good news and maybe not so good news. The good news is that we are adding people to our company quite a lot. So we are hiring every year more than 11,000 people and adding
every year more than 11,000.
Every year and adding 5,000 net.
Is that in Europe?
Worldwide, I have to say. Which means that we have to process 1.1 million applications every year, besides producing the goods we are doing. So we are hiring. The good news is that at the moment we are not so much handicapped to find people. And I don't know if it's good news or bad news, because we are lucky that we're taking people from other industries which are not having such a growth curve than we have. But that will hopefully not continue.
Could you talk a little bit about that, the other industries that perhaps you're able to take skilled workers from?
We know that everything who is in the electricity sector at the moment is booming. We are growing double digit. We all know that automotive, chemistry, pharmacy is a little bit under pressure. On the other hand, we have a very good image. We are green, we are sustainable, we are doing the right things. That works with young people very well. So we have, from that point of view, not so many problems to find the people. But we have problems to train people because we have still a lot of manual labor. If you talk about a transformer, for instance, that's a gigantic thing of 450 metric tons. It's a core of copper which have to be stacked by 2 millimeter sheets of metal to adding it up. Then you have to wind copper around it, and it has to be done manually. It takes 2 to 3 years to educate somebody that he can co-work or work alone. And that cannot be speed up. That cannot be automated by robots, and not in the next 5 to 10 years. So the good news is that manual labor is sought after. I think it takes some training, and we are becoming better at that. But the good news is we are finding people. But I can only agree with the minister, a free flow of people and material in Europe could be improved in some certain things, because we have sometimes to send people around in Europe, and it's not as always that easy as it sounds. There's a lot of red tape behind that we are normally not seeing, but we are processing it in the background, and that's probably could be much easier.
Just following on that, Minister, drilling back down to Europe, dreadful pun, utterly intended. What does the energy transition mean then from an employment standpoint? If there are plenty of people at the moment, there is a shortage for trained people, but this sounds like good news from an employment standpoint in Europe.
Absolutely. When you look at Ireland's perspective, we've about 2.82 million people employed in our economy right now. 1 in 5 people working in our country was not born in Ireland. And that shows you the diversity. And when we meet our clients, it's frequently said that you would have 60, 70 different languages spoken in many of the offices that are ever present on the landscape in our economy, which is a good testament to our diversity. And it's one thing we really focus on then is keeping upskilling and retraining. And I know our colleagues in the IDA are doing exceptional work. They had a 5-year plan, which they're working on now. And then over the 5 years, bear in mind they have a client base of around 300,000 workers in our economy. They set an objective to skill and upskill about 50,000 people over the 5 years. In year 1, we've got to 33,000. And that shows the demand ever present of changing technologies, of embarking on that green transition. And when you create such a demand like we're doing in Ireland in terms of large energy users, and we've come forward with so many policy pieces on how we're going to manage that energy demand and that transition, that gives us a huge opportunity to deliver our green, clean energy, particularly on our offshore piece where we have so much ambition over the next number of decades.
And perhaps I'll come back to you, Andreas, to follow on that. But what kind of public-private, we're talking about training as one of the issues, less than bodies. What kind of public-private training partnerships have the greatest potential to scale for you, for all of you across this European ecosystem for energy?
Well, it's something what we are doing already. We have partnerships with universities, we have partnerships with the communities where we have production setups, because we know ahead of the planning what we need. So we are in schools, we are at universities, we are at local societies to really talk and to try to get the people. And that's working very well. At the moment, I have to say the biggest issue for me in some locations is not getting the people, it's getting the local housing, getting the schools, getting the streets up, because our growth in certain areas is so high that cities literally running out of transportation issues, out housing, schools, and so on, which is a good thing, but I never imagined that I'm talking about social housing and public transportations to mayors of cities, because the growth is really very great.
Do you need to be in cities, or are you looking at outside of cities green spaces where you could perhaps create mini communities?
Well, we are in this business more than 100 years. So we have built actually cities around where we have production sites. And production sites have been created where was the business, and mining industries and other setups. As electricity age started more than 100 years ago, that was just the way it is. So yes, we at the moment investing mainly into brownfield expansion because it's the easiest and the fastest way. We have the people, the processes, we know the communities. We are carefully investing in greenfield. We could do more actually because there's more demand, but it depends on our customer behavior. But what happens if you build a factory greenfield, soon you have housing around it, soon you create a city and a community. That's just the way it goes.
And you're back to the questions about schools and, of course.
And then you're running out of space. If you look what happens today in the big cities, this industrial space 50, 100 years ago, which was in the middle of nowhere, now is in the middle of the city. And then you have to relocate.
But if these steps are not taken. What do you think for Europe, if Europe fails to build out this workforce, what are the concrete implications for the grid resilience, for the critical infrastructure, for the energy security, which has been a dominating conversation throughout Davos this week?
Well, I think from a workforce point of view, it's easy. Investments are flowing where you have a kind of welcome culture, where people want you to invest, where you have the infrastructure, where you have the people available, where you have the customers as well. And we are a global company. We're producing worldwide and literally worldwide. And it's a very flexible supply chain. So if one area is not developing that well, it will be covered up by others. Then you see, of course, economic growth in other areas, but you can supply the equipment. The bigger question is the second part of your question. What happens if we are not building a resilient grid? What happens if the energy transition to a more independent, more resilient network is failing? And that's actually a very critical question, because the grids we see in Europe and North America and most parts of the world are built pretty resilient for the moment. There are a lot of safety factors in. So if you underinvest for a couple of years or decades, nothing has happened. Then normally always say, look, you see, that was not necessary, everything is fine, the sun is shining. But then eventually, and then rather fast, you see the side effects. You see voltage fluctuations, you see maybe brownouts, that the voltage is lower. And in former times, you would have seen that the lights are going a little bit darker than before. Now I would say probably they would go out completely. Then you see probably blackouts. That can happen. We have seen it in Spain, we have seen it in Berlin, we have seen it in other things. And then you have rotating load shedding, that you will live in areas where you have only electrical energy for a couple of hours during the day and not, as we think, on your fingertips. And then, of course, that will hurt economic growth. That will definitely be not easy to recover, because if you're over that curve, to build that resilient again takes a lot of time. But sometimes we are not very good to seeing the early alarming signs.
Well, speaking of time and the time it takes, Minister, what EU-level decisions in the next 1 to 2 years would most accelerate the skills delivery for the energy transition, but also what Andreas was just talking about, the additional factors?
Yeah, firstly, I would just really echo how important it is for countries to really invest in their grid infrastructure, to really take the opportunity that is in the digital transition. And you look from an Irish context, our capital plan over the next 5 years for our grid, for our infrastructure, is about €19 billion. If you consider that its predecessor was about 8, that shows you the pace of change that we are going in terms of generation capacity, but also the lines, the infrastructure that bring all the energy around to different parts of our country and that enable economic growth, and that also bring in our large energy users, which are critical for the digital transition. Right now, at this point in time, we've about 22% of our metered electricity is going to our large energy users. Under our capital plan, we'll be able to bring that over 30% by 2030. There are 2 gigawatts of energy going in. And then obviously we're looking at bringing in new renewables into the grid in the years subsequent. And if you look at skills, I think from a European perspective, there's another number of things we can do. I think we have to up our game on interconnectivity. We look from our perspective, we have our Celtic interconnector with France, which is going to be very important. We're going to treble our interconnectivity by 2027. That's with France and also the UK. But also on skills, I think the union of skills is going to be very important to ensure that there is a cohesive plan right across the 27 member states that's low on administrative burden, that really works on lifelong learning, and that looks at where are the skills of the future critically needed. And one thing we really get very well in our country is that working and partnering with academia, because you can do so many things in tertiary education that you can't replicate in industry. But when you work so hard and commercialize that research and bring both of them together, you can get into a very special space, very strong ecosystem. And we've embarked upon that, be it in life sciences, in semiconductors, in tech. And that's why green is so important for us now. And when I look at our budgetary perspective, we've brought about €1 billion over the last year, working, partnering with industry on decarbonisation. And some of the most iconic brands in our country, everyone will be familiar with a pint of Guinness. Diageo, such an important company, and such a company that they're brewing for 264 years. And when you look at their plan over the next decade, working in partnership with government to decarbonise shows you anyone can do it, and it can create good, high-value jobs, and also, obviously, it's better for the environment.
You just made me thirsty. That thing you mentioned, the union of skills, is that an actual thing, or is that a term that you're using? Does that exist already, or is it something that Ireland is thinking about putting at the top of the agenda when you take the presidency of the Commission?
It will be one of the areas that the Commission has brought forward this year, an area that will bring a platform trying to really advance the movement of workers, the agility that we need to get back from a European perspective. And when we hopefully take our presidency in July, it will be one of the areas we'll be looking at. But I think top of Ireland's agenda really will be competitiveness. And I will be chairing the Competitive Council for that 6 months. And it's so important that we really get to grips on the simplification agenda. We have about 10 omnibus pieces of legislation that are now on the books that we're trying to get through the European Parliament. It's so important we have urgency attached to those, as well as revising so many of the key instruments and regulations that really have to reflect that Europe needs to get in the forefront of the innovation curve again. And Ireland will be very much focusing on that simplification agenda, better regulation, and we've worked with our partners each side of our presidency to ensure that there is continuity, that if we don't succeed in getting everything through, that the baton will be picked up on the other side.
I have one more question for you, Minister, on this, and I am coming back to you, Andreas, but you could weigh in on this. Where you've described the energy, and that actually was an unintended pun, but you've described the energy in Ireland at the moment for this, for green, for this growth, for this planning, for these collaborations. Where is Ireland in Europe, in the EU? Are you at the forefront of this build-out? Are you in the middle? I'd love to hear what you both think about that.
So we're just about mid-table. It's incredible to note that over 2 decades ago, Ireland had a wind farm, Arklow Bank, off its east coast. But there was a pause, unfortunately, for the intervening period of time. And really when the green transition and acceleration and the urgency has come out through the climate emergency and the work that has been carried out, that scientific evidence, we've had a huge urgency attached. We brought in a new planning and consent regime, set up an independent authority, and we're de-risking it for developers. So what we're saying is there's areas on our east coast that are suitable for development. These are the areas. So it reduces the planning risk because you have, like you would have in a small town or village, a local area plan, we have a DMAP which really shows the areas which are suitable for development. And hopefully by 2030, we'll have over 6 gigawatts well through development on our offshore renewables. And that will obviously give us more stability as a country because we know we're price takers at the moment, and that is a big challenge when you're, when you see the international uncertainty, when you see the first war on mainland Europe in a generation and the impact that has had on energy, on inflation. And if we can get more independence on our energy market, which we have the resources to do. And that's the exciting thing about Ireland, not only in offshore, by 2030 we'll be bringing about 9 gigawatts of onshore wind, 8 gigawatts of solar, developing that out and developing the infrastructure. As technology also evolves in terms of storage, we will be very much at the forefront of that. And what we've really done, which is also very exciting, we've upped our game on research, development and innovation. We have a very exciting offering to businesses now, 35% our R&D tax credit, horizontal, available to all with the support of our agencies. So what that means is companies coming in, when they invest in the know-how and the technology, for every euro they spend, we'll meet them with 50 cents halfway, and that's very important for our value proposition.
Maybe I pitch in,
yes,
because from my point of view, Ireland is a perfect example of the energy transition. Natural resources are not really existing, importing quite a lot. That has led to a build-out of a lot of renewables, offshore wind and other things, which is a good thing, because you're becoming more independent. On the other hand, we are all learning now that you can build electrical grids only up to 60–70% with renewables, then you need another form of that. Could be gas, it could be nuclear, it could be hydro, whatever, but you need something to mixture that. And you need interconnectivity, what you are building out as well. You cannot see it as an island. You need interconnectivities to France, to Great Britain, or to other parts for the exchange of energy, because sometimes you have too much, sometimes you have too low. And that's actually the strategy I see worldwide coming, and Ireland is most advanced on that. You have a lot of data centers, which doesn't make it easier from my point of view. But I think it's a kind of prototype of a renewable-driven, sustainable and resilient grid if you're doing all these actions. The only question is how you can become faster on that. Infrastructure projects like that normally taking 6 to 7 years, like an interconnectivity. only 3 years are really construction and building things. 3 to 4 years are permitting and planning, which is bad for the business case because it's costing money. And I think the fastest way is to cut that down to maybe half of it. And that's something.
Which, Minister, it sounds like those initiatives you were talking about, like pre-deciding that this part of the coastline is available for build-out and the working with the higher education institutions, it sounds like that is the work that you are trying to do in Ireland to cut that incredible amount of time down in half.
And we have to continue in that pace. I absolutely agree 100% with that. In our new government, our programme for government, we had a target to bring forward an action plan on competitiveness and productivity within the first year. We did it in the first 6 months. And all the actions are flowing from that now, like real choreographed, thought out investment offerings. In our energy, we had the CRU, which is our regulator, set out a position paper where the scope is for industry for large energy users. Secondly, we brought forward a large energy user policy, which is working with renewables firstly on sites where you can have your large energy user in an energy park with your very significant generation capacity. We're going to have private wires, which is coming through this year, which will allow a private wire, that agility we need as a small country to connect to the grid. And we'll have our investment capital plan, our PR6, which is nearly 19 billion euros. So all those are sequenced to send to the market. We're very serious about that. And then on our offshore piece, we have really de-risked a lot of the investment in terms of offering as much certainty as we can. And through our action plan on competitiveness and productivity, we're looking at licensing, trying to make permits more efficient, and trying to look at the interoperability, as I spoke, from a European context of so many of those regulators, and trying to just really, if we look at the Draghi scorecard that set out the challenge we still have to do from the Draghi report, we have a huge amount of work to do, and Ireland really want to reposition ourselves in July to say, Europe, we need to get serious. We need to drive the simplification agenda, get the omnibus pieces through, get the revisions through, and essentially bring Europe again to a very strong growth phase. Because if we get areas like the 28 regime, the simplification methods for new companies, startups, all of those areas, if we can make impact and progress on that, I think we'll have a very exciting opportunity and a very strong value proposition from a European perspective.
I have a couple more questions to get in before we run out of time. So interesting. You mentioned, I don't know if you use this term, but you were really talking about the sovereignty of energy. And I wonder, Andreas, I said at the start that usually we talk about energy in terms of geopolitics and technology and capital, and now we're talking about people, but those other things are really important. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that, are you more optimistic about the pace that all this is going to move at now that the conversation seems to have shifted from sustainability to sovereignty? Is that something you think is going to move this forward faster?
I think it's going to move that faster. And so I would say it's not a contradiction. Sustainability and sovereignty are different pieces of a medal from my point of view. How sustainable you are is one thing. How independent you are is a different thing. And I think the energy transition is even gaining speed, because if you have no natural resources, if you're importing everything on molecules, you're becoming reliant, because we all learned the hard way that energy security and safety depends as well from geopolitics. You can purchase the things. We have all seen what happens to Europe or to Germany as we have become too dependent from natural gas. So I think this is just driving this thing in a different speed, because now every country, every region have to find out what are my geopolitical risks, what are the resources I have, what are the resources I'm going to deploy, and what is my local strategy to become resilient, and that can be quite different from country to country. But for Europe, it ends up in a way we only can do that together. We need more interconnectivity between Ireland, even the UK, which is still part of Europe in a geographical way, and from electrical grid part, and all the countries, because we can exchange energy, we can use and leverage that. And I think that's actually speeding up the energy transition in a good way instead of de-accelerating that. And the money we are spending shows that. Your plans are showing that. It's exactly the right direction from my point of view. It is a different set of environment where we have found ourselves in the last couple of years than we have thought maybe 10 years ago. But it's definitely going in the right direction.
So I'd like to finish with giving you both sort of 60 or so seconds. So take yourselves forward into the future, not very far, just a couple of years. Minister, I'm going to come to you first. How do we know that Europe is on track? What does success look like from your perspective just 2 years out?
I think success looks like, and the shape of it is high quality, good jobs for our people. If we get upwards of 3.5 million good green jobs in European context over the next 4 years. Success looks like that we are really back on the forefront of innovation, that we have managed the green transition together with the digital transition, those huge amount of opportunities that are very much energy intensive, but also can finance, help and capitalize other areas of that transition. I think that would be a sweet spot that we could get into from a European context, and that we work on our skills and we future-proof our tertiary education, that we're looking down the line, what are the degrees of the future, what should they look like, how can they be impacted to assist and deliver the skills that we need in a growing economy, and get back to really strong growth from a European context and embark upon competitiveness, really ensure that we're enhancing the productive capacity of our economies, we're working with connectivity, and it's critical what Andreas said there. When I talk about sovereignty, you have to look at, we don't want to be as a continent relying on hostile actors for our energy. We want interconnectorship, that we can work as a European Union, help each other depending on what capacity we can generate at any particular time. I know in our country we can go from 70% to 40% in any given day. And that's why we need to look at other areas too. And obviously there's so many other methods of energy on the renewable side that we're working on in Ireland as well.
Perfectly stated. And last word to you, Andreas, that same question, just 2 years, what does good look like?
Well, 2 years is way too short, I know what I have to produce for the next 6 years already. Let's put the time horizon a little bit out, make it 10 or 15 years, which is probably the right thing for infrastructure projects. If you would have in 15 years one strategy about energy and electricity, what we want to use to produce electricity, how we want to transport that we have one European market, transparent market, and not what we have to do, which is more collection of 27 single markets, where we have an integrated, resilient energy net, where we can transport electrons from one end to the other, where we can have this possibility to be really resilient and safe. That would be a major step forward.
Gentlemen, that sadly is all we have time for. I've enjoyed this discussion immensely. I hope you have. I hope all of you have. Thank you very much. Andreas and Minister Burke.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Taras Kachka, Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Stephanie Flanders.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister. I know it's a very busy day, and maybe a bit busier for you because your president, Zelensky, who was originally not going to come to World Economic Forum, he's now here. I think he's meeting with the president in a little while, President Trump.
No, first and foremost, initially, so that our president planned to participate in World Economic Forum. The only problem that we have is that Russia shelled our cities again. You know that Ukraine now has one of the severest winters, so that the temperature is like -15, -20, and Russia deliberately destroys electricity, district heating, and water supply. So tries to kill our cities and create humanitarian catastrophes and everywhere, in Kiev, in Dnipro, in Kharkiv. Those are all big cities that have more than 1 million inhabitants. So that's why President decided to shorten his program. But today there are two elements: is the meeting with President Trump and also the events in the World Economic Forum. So that's also meeting with energy companies who can help us with repairment of energy system.
But there was a suggestion that your president was also not wanting to come unless there was clear progress, either in signing the security guarantees for Ukraine or in the so-called prosperity package from the US, the $800 billion. Is there any progress on either of those?
There is a progress since we had a lot of talks both on prosperity and security, so that we negotiated three of us, United States, Ukraine and the European Union. We provisionally designed the document on prosperity, which is rather like a policy document explaining the further work streams and to-do list for next at least 100 days. On how to deploy this prosperity infrastructure. For security, there were as well talks between a Ukrainian team and US team yesterday, and these talks will continue. So that's why the progress is there. I don't think that we are ready for signing the document. It means all of us, yes. So that since there is no position of Russian Federation, and their position is important, since we are talking about like ceasefire and peace as well.
Has anyone? I mean, there's going to be private, public, non-profit organisations contributing potentially to that package to help rebuild Ukraine, rebuild the economy. Has anyone actually committed any money to it at this point?
First and foremost, we have long-term commitment from the European Union, so that both monetary, so that we have a 90 billion loan that helps us to survive 2026 and 2027, and there is a plan to have a budget for Ukraine for within next multi-annual financial framework of the European Union for 2028, 2034. So that it's around 100 billion euros. So that's also then an anchor for the prosperity programs, both for macro-financial stability and also for seeding the private investments through different kind of funds that already are established. So that you know that we have Ukraine-US Recovery Investment Fund, URIF. So that which was born in the context of mineral deal with the United States. And also we have flagship fund, European flagship fund, which encourages private investments, and it was already deployed within Ukraine investment framework of the European Union. So we already have a framework that will attract private capital, and we see that there are already progresses on several projects in exploration, in real estate and some other areas where business can happen here and now as well.
There's quite a lot of focus here, or renewed focus, on the potential for Ukraine to enter the European Union on some basis, and discussion around the European Union actually sort of tearing up their normal process to make it conceivable that Ukraine could join on some basis next year. But part of that was for Ukraine to open those clusters. I think we probably don't want to go into the details of it, but I know Hungary was making that difficult. Has there been any progress on that?
You see the complexity of your question shows that this is like a very complex knot of different streams, and this is literally what is going on. So they have a like path dependence of different tracks, so that the peace solution is based on the security pillar and prosperity pillar. Prosperity, so that the economic development of Ukraine is possible if we have three pillars: strong security commitments, so that's why they go together. Financial stability, so we need macro-financial stability and also support for maintaining Ukrainian army, since it's like one of the core elements of security guarantees as well. And the third element is a trusted and predictable environment, which is like can be certified by EU accession. And EU accession by itself is also a geopolitical element that consolidate the security guarantees by themselves. So that's why in this environment, we have several nuances in our EU accession path. So it remains to be merit-based process, so that we are delivering our reforms and we receive EU accession. At the same time, we want to have a very clear commitment from the European Union for this all the security environment, that we have a precise date of our accession. So then it will be like mutual political commitment. And of course, we are thinking how we can speed up this process, how we can do something in parallel, what used to be done in sequence in previous accession for other states. And of course, we believe that the involvement of the United States and general peace environment will change position of those member states who are opposed. After all, you know that Prime Minister Orban always says that accession is directly related to the fact of war in Ukraine. So that's why if we are talking about accession as a part of peace solution, so it means that even in the logic of Prime Minister Orban, he should change his position.
You mentioned the situation in the cities, and I can say we have discussions with our own bureau and reporters working for Bloomberg in Kiev. Our bureau chief, Dasha Krasnoludska, who gave us the questions for this. I know she's sitting freezing. They can't use the bureau because it's so cold. Have you been able to really have good conversations about moving forward with a ceasefire, with an agreement, while everyone here has been talking about Greenland? I mean, how difficult has that been for you?
We are lucky that so that we have the smartest people in the gathered here, so that's why we can talk. We can talk and handle the conversation on different topics, not only on one. So that's why we managed, and all our partners managed to talk about Greenland and Ukraine. And today during Ukrainian breakfast, Mark Rutte mentioned that the NATO involvement into the Greenland solution, and he highlighted that Ukraine is a core element, since the core enemy for Europe and for NATO is Russia. So that's why there is no unfocus. Everyone is focused and is moving forward. And yesterday's speech of President Trump is as well was quite clear on this, that all topics have been covered properly. On situation in Ukraine, it is very close to the humanitarian catastrophe. So that's what Daria and Volodymyr can describe, that how cold it is. I think that we still can make some jokes on this, because I joke that out of free heat, water or electricity, you can choose two, or sometimes only one. Yeah, so that but if it will be like zero and permanently, it will be catastrophe. You cannot survive in this, especially if you have frost on -10, -15. And for us, this is a matter where Russia believes that it can force us to surrender in this situation, but the real reaction will be to bounce back. So that means that the people in Ukraine will definitely be of position that we cannot surrender, we cannot stop fighting if Russia destroys our city.
But it is very effective for Russia in one way at least. It persuades many people, and certainly potentially many in Washington, that they are right to think that Russia is winning, even though I think you are making good. It seems like there's been a big increase in Russian casualties in the last couple of months. And on the battlefield, I think our understanding is that things have been going much better for Ukraine. But the overriding impression people have is of this enormous pressure on the Ukrainian population.
Let me disagree with you. So it might be sound strange, but indeed we increased the number of losses for Russia. They lose, let's say, thousands of soldiers killed daily, and they really they burn the people daily on the front line. What we see now is an attempt of Russia, I don't know, in romantic way, or their sadistic understanding of history is just to use the very cold weather to punish civilian people. So it is not warfare. It's just really war crimes, deliberate destruction of civilians, attacking of civilians, and they somehow believe that it can force us to change our position. It will be vice versa. We will survive. We have a lot of support. We encourage all energy companies to supply us equipment. Our energy companies repairing everything very fast with enormous speed. And I also receive some feedbacks from my children, and they say, okay, we now have electricity, now have water, and so on. It's just popping up in different areas. So we will survive. We will go through this winter, but Ukrainians will know that everyone will witness the fact that Russia tried to kill literally everyone in Ukrainian cities.
But meanwhile, we have a situation, your president is about to talk to President Trump, but you have Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner going to Russia to talk to President Putin, again the Ukrainians not in the room. Do you have a sense, I mean, that is obviously a frustration, but do you have a sense of, they say they're 90% of the way there. How is that going to move? How is President Putin going to move?
We have a lot of people from corporate world here in Davos, yeah. So that's why I think that everyone will get an understanding that peace process is not a classical project management when you have like policy cycle planning and the clear results on the date that you planned with a little postponement and a little bigger budget, yeah. So that's, well, this is like absolutely unique process. I'm happy that the United States are engaged in this process. They understand that this is an art, so that this is like very tailor-made or bespoke approach. We are working and engaged with them on like 24/7 on all elements, and we believe that these undertakings will result into the fact that Russians will be in trilateral negotiations and finding a solution that will be really strong, long-lasting, and bring prosperity and stability to Ukraine and Europe.
I know you have to go to your next meeting, so as a last question, and forgive me, Deputy Prime Minister, there's I'm sure a lot of sympathy for people here listening to you and talking about the experience of Ukrainians in cities. But as you know, there has also been some criticism from your European partners of Ukraine allowing men under age of 22 to cross the border. Are you, Germany and others have been concerned about that? Are you rethinking that?
So that nothing is ideal in our story from 2020 to 2024, so and 2026, yeah. So that's like for these 4 years. Sorry for missing dates. So that's this decision. Yes, indeed, we got some remarks from some governments, and we are in the course of consideration on how to react to this fact. We are verifying figures and then different cases and so on. Indeed, this is a topic that is under discussion. So that's, and maybe there will be some announcement later.
So you can see that you can recognize the concern and you'll respond to
but
it.
We are very frank with our partners. So that's we also we discuss what we need, how they can help, how we can deliver reforms, people, and a lot of other things, logistics, trade. You heard about the tensions between farmers and so on. So there were a lot of different situations, but we managed to tackle all of them for these 4 years.
Deputy Prime Minister, thank you so much
for
your honest remarks. Thank you. You're getting a bonus, I think.
Exactly. President Milei is on his way, but until he gets here, we thought it would be interesting to have John Micklethwaite, the editor-in-chief, speak with Stephanie about what their takeaways are from this momentous week. So, John, please come on stage.
I think the good news is we've got quite a few takeaways from even this morning, so it's quite... So, John, at the beginning of this week, we sat, the first event here at Bloomberg House was an episode of Trumponomics,
so
where we were talking...
Now framing it.
Now we have a bookend where we get a chance to say a little bit about what we've learned in some of these interviews. I know you interviewed Mark Rutte this morning, who was the man of the moment, having solved all of the Greenland problem, supposedly. What did you get from him while everyone here was listening to Ian Farage?
He is still very carefully giving all the credit to President Trump, which in some ways is a bit weird because you saw Trump, we all saw Trump on top of that stage addressing the world and saying how proud and happy he would be to take control of this great big beautiful piece of ice as he saw it. And then he disappeared into a room with Mark Rutte, and he came out of that saying everything was fine, but he doesn't seem to have actually got any sovereignty over things. There's a big debate about that, but Rutte was very, very clear with me that they did not discuss sovereignty in any way. So the guess, and this is really just you and me guessing, is that it will be some form of very long-term lease on quite a large series of bases, and probably with the possibility of putting a lot of troops in there, but it's still very much remaining parts of Denmark. And you had Nigel Farage.
Yeah, I think some of the people will have may have been here for that. It was what you call a freewheeling interview. But I think, the interesting thing for me was attempting to pin him down. He's a hard man to pin down, but attempting to pin him down on foreign policy in particular. Actually, he was for him, and actually I think for some of the other populist parties in Europe, this week has put them in a difficult position.
Very difficult.
Partly because obviously they had been allied with Donald Trump, but also if you are very nationalist in this world and you say that's what's come out of this new global war. I mean, that's what Nigel Farage said this morning. The new global order is not global, is nation states. But anyone watching this week would say the lesson was you can't, the new world order is you can't trust the US and you need to get together with other countries, more or less what Mark Carney said. And he was not accepting that message. But I think it's one, I mean, a lot of the populist parties you've seen in Europe who are doing so well in the polls have been facing a choice this week, and many of them have come out, we've written about it, many of them have come out very critical of Donald Trump's Greenland approach.
Yeah, I think there's been a really clear division. You have the nationalist parties, and Nigel Farage, you have to describe that way. They are in an awkward situation because, and in many ways for Farage, every time Trump appears in a European context, it's sort of bad news for him. It's fun when he goes off and appears on a campaign rally. But when Trump comes here and starts sort of appearing to boss Britain around, you know, that is different. That's difficult for a patriot like Nigel Farage. Meanwhile, what's quite interesting, I think, to me, is this arguably, I asked Ruta this, and inevitably he ducked the question, that this could be the week where centrist Europe finally discovered its backbone. Because if you know, we all, as we're saying on Trumponomics, there's lots of talk about the taco trade. Trump always chickens out. And there's no doubt that if you bet on that this week, you've done quite well once again. But compared with the Sacco, Starmer always chickens out. You know, that has been a bet you've won every single time. But this time, same with Macron, Merz hasn't really done very much so far. But suddenly you're beginning to see, I think, from the centre of European leaders, again, much more off the stage than on it when you talk to them privately. You know, this time I think Trump went too far. And he's really pushed the Europeans into a place. So yes, Greenland may go away. And you hear a lot of talk from people around the administration that, you know, this was just Trump being Trump. Why did the Europeans get so upset? It's just about some piece of ice in the North Atlantic. But actually, if you are a European leader, this has slightly been the week where you thought, actually, we have to do something about Europe. We have to get our defence sorted out. And we have to plan for a life, at least for the next 3 years, that doesn't wholly rely on America. And that's quite interesting. There's a balance between that and Farage.
I do think, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because that could be one of the lessons from this week. I think the Europeans, as ever, have been able to see their situation and what needs to happen very clearly. That is not always the problem with Europe. It's the doing of it. You see that on the economic front as well. But I think it partly comes down to not just what happens afterwards, but what actually drove the change in Donald Trump's position. Do we actually think he changed his mind or backed off, at least for now, because of the unity of at least 8 EU countries, not all of them? I mean, the Danes have actually pointed out quietly that it was only 8, not everybody in Europe. But the unity of those countries, was that what put the pressure on him? Or was it, in fact, before he even arrived here, quite a lot of conversations he'd had with people outside the administration, people he'd known for years, people in Congress, distinguished senators, saying, actually, you sound a bit mad talking about Greenland, and it's not popular with our constituents. You're not going to get anywhere with this. And I think the fact that he didn't mention tariffs in relation to Greenland in that very long speech where he talked about tariffs in many other contexts suggested to me that he'd already backed down at that point.
I think there was an element, yes, the fact the markets turned on Trump so quickly, I think that mattered. I think public opinion, the only Edelman have a thing about trust and so on. But as I understand it, and I haven't actually seen it, but somebody reported it to me, if you ask the American public about should you get Greenland, you come back with 75% saying no. I mean, that in a very, very divided country, it's virtually impossible to get close to 75% on anything else. So he really was running up against it on that. But on the issue about, but I think there was a bit of it being communicated to him. You have to imagine that people who have quite good relations with the Trump administration, you look perhaps at people like the people around Keir Starmer, to be fair to him, I think they did communicate to people around Trump that this time he had gone too far. But like everything else, at the moment everyone thinks it's Trump chickened out. he could spiral off on some other thing later today.
And, one of the lessons, although he often chickens out, nothing ever goes away completely. Something that he has had, what economists would call a revealed preference for talking about, something that he goes on and on about and did in the previous term, first term, you get the sense it'll keep coming back. And even whatever deal is done, I mean, that's the other message of this week, whatever deal might be done will never really be done if he decides to reopen it. I wonder whether that's the kind of bigger message of this week.
I think possibly, it was interesting talking to Rutte and actually to other European leaders, is that they very much, when they look at what's happened in Greenland, it has been appalling for them, it's been really tough, it's put lots of them in strange positions, including people like Farage. But, a very big but, what they really care about is Ukraine, which you've just had the conversation about. And there, they worry deeply that Trump's instinct, as one of them told me yesterday, is to blame Zelensky for everything. And that is a worry, that is a very, very worrying thing if you are a large European nation. And the idea that Zelensky could be bullied into giving up the land, especially that idea that he has a defendable front line at the moment. And if suddenly he's asked to give up the whole of the Donbass, that is a very difficult thing for him.
And isn't that part of the problem? I mean, going back to whether or not Europe has discovered its spine this week, the one thing that it's going to struggle most to do that on is Ukraine, because it is so dependent on the US to force some kind of movement out of Vladimir Putin.
I'm slightly disagreeing with you there. I think there is more. I think in some of the European powers now, obviously not really kind of Spain and the more ones further away from Ukraine. You look at Poland, you look at Germany, the kind of language that's coming out of Germany. You look even at bits of France and things. People are now, I think, for the first time, really facing up to the idea that Putin wants to keep on expanding unless they do something about it, and they cannot rely on America for that. They will be in trouble. So I think in that way, a combination of Trump and Putin has woken them up. You had that. You mentioned that thing, which I think is a quote attributable to the great. I was about to say late, but I think he's alive. Jean-Claude Juncker, that giant of European politics, who, if you remember, at one time, Merkel cleverly set up the world so that you would have Xi Jinping, Barack Obama to represent two great economies, and then Jean-Claude Juncker to represent Europe. But I think what he said was that in Europe, we all know what to do. We just don't know how to get elected after we've done it. But I think now you can sense from some of these leaders this idea that if they don't do anything, they're going to go down. So they might as well go down fighting for what they believe in.
That was actually, I mean, going back to Nigel Farage, he does face this Donald Trump issue at home as well. I mean, we've talked about how it poses issues in terms of policy with respect to Europe and how you think about foreign policy. But I mean, he's now one of the most one of the most unpopular people in the UK, and I think there was a real turn in public opinion this weekend when he threatened over Greenland. And you get the sense, I mean, even as they go into sort of local government elections in the UK, which the Reform could well do extremely well in, he's got to be a little bit careful about how he plays that relationship with Donald Trump.
How important do you think Latin America is? We have many people here, I suspect, if it's any sign from last year, will have gathered mainly to listen to President Milei.
Who is astonishingly
slightly late. But I think to be fair to him, it's because he's still signing the Board of Peace.
That's true.
But he is, I'm assured, on his way.
Well, I think that we have had this big focus, obviously, from the US in their own backyard, aggressively in the case of Venezuela. It's interesting how much the focus there, I mean, the focus with Greenland is very much on security. Focus in South America is very much on resources. We obviously saw that in a big way in Venezuela. But it's also striking to me, I mean, there's another reason why the US were so keen to underpin support for Argentina and that crucial election that President Milei could have been very damaged at the end of last year, was actually as the oil production in Argentina is ramping up. and I know our chief commodity commentator would never have expected so many barrels of oil to be coming out of Argentina. But it is, you can see there a real, whatever we say about Donald Trump sounding unstable when he talks about Greenland and everything else, it's a pretty consistent, it's an internally coherent, consistent policy that's strength in Latin America. And you'd have to say more consistent with previous administrations, certainly going back 50, 100, with a longer time frame, more consistent than some of the things he's done in other frameworks. But does anyone talk to you about Latin America when you're here? No.
Not, obviously now we will hear a great deal about Latin America, but on the whole, no. I think the whole focus has been on Europe, which is intriguing given the fact that Venezuela played such a massive role until recently. I do think there is a debate about Donald Trump in Latin America which goes something like this, is that it's very clear that it's a bad thing to be the enemy of Donald Trump in Latin America. We saw what happened to Maduro. It's not quite yet clear what the benefits of being a friend of Donald Trump are in Latin America. President Milei's got his swap line, but it's still very obvious that he needs to do a lot of things with the Argentine economy that Donald Trump can't immediately help him with.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to how much there is the challenge for Donald Trump's whole approach is it has been an awful lot about stick and extraction of money or promises of resources and other things, and not so much about he talks about what you've got in return over the last 50, 60 years, but countries are paying a price now rather than actually benefiting in real time. And when they do a deal, it's not necessarily done. I think we have President Milei, I think, is now a little bit further away, so we will allow you to released from our rambling for a few minutes.
He is a few minutes away. He's en route, though. So we're going to restart at 12:30 when just after he arrives. I'd recommend staying in your seats if you want to keep them. But we'll restart in a few minutes. Thank you, John and Stephanie.
Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please silence all phones. Our program will now begin. Please welcome to the stage His Excellency Javier Milei, President of the Republic of Argentina, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Editor-in-Chief, John Micklethwaite.
very difficult to find somebody at the
Apparently
right
they want
side.
us to check.
Microphones.
Apparently we have to change.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I said to the President when he arrived that he would be sitting on the right, which seemed appropriate. Thank you, President Milei. Thank you very much for talking to Bloomberg again. Last year, I think we discussed free market economics, dogs and the Rolling Stones. But this time, we are going to begin with Venezuela. You welcomed the removal of President Maduro, but the Trump administration seems quite happy at the moment with sticking with Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, who is loyal to Maduro. And you very much described the Maduro regime as a narco-terrorist dictatorship. So what has changed? Are you worried that nothing has changed in Venezuela?
No, no es así como lo señala.
No, it's not
En primer lugar,
that
quiero
way.
destacar
First of all, I would like
la
to
enorme tarea del
recognize
presidente
the
Trump y de Marco
tremendous
Rubio.
work
Primero,
done by
en lo
President
que
Trump
fue
and Marco Rubio.
extraer
First, in
al
order to
narco
extract
tirano,
the
dictador,
narco tyrant,
asesino
dictator, murderer,
de Maduro,
Maduro,
que además se dedicaba a propagar el
who also
terrorismo
made a
por
point of
toda
spreading terrorism
la región,
across the whole region,
financiando campañas,
funding
financiando
campaigns and
actos terroristas.
financing terrorist acts out on the streets, complicating lives for all governments that were not pro-21st century socialism. So I warmly welcome that situation. On the other hand, I think the plan designed by the US administration in 3 phases is quite appropriate. The first one has to do with stabilization, which is the current phase. Then will come the reconstruction, and then the transition towards democracy. The thing is, it wouldn't be possible to do it otherwise. You know, stabilization needs to be done this way.
Que estamos en América y que hemos
Our
sufrido y
countries in
que
the
todavía
Americas
seguimos
that have
padeciendo
suffered and
la
continue
intromisión
to suffer
de las huestes del
the
siglo, del socialismo del
encroachment
siglo
of the
XXI en la
hosts of
estructura
21st century
del
socialism
Estado,
on the
digamos, que
structures
trabajan
of the
como
state. You see,
básicamente
they
policía del
basically work
pensamiento durante
as if they
gestiones del
were
socialismo
thought
del siglo
police,
XXI.
you know, under 21st
Actúan como
century
espías cuando
socialism
están fuera del poder, alguien del signo
administrations.
de
And
ellos,
when they're not
se
in
dedican
government,
a
they act as
sabotear
spies, and they
a
make a
gobiernos
point
de
of
signos
sabotaging
distintos.
governments
muy
that
difícil,
are not
digamos, si usted
that do not
piensa
belong
eso
to
en
the ranks. It's
Venezuela,
very
eso sería
difficult. You see,
100%.
in Venezuela,
Con
that
lo
would be
cual,
the
digamos,
case,
creer que
100%. So,
existe otra posibilidad,
thinking that there could be another possible way of managing the stabilization process truly means not understanding the limits of reality as such. So, in my view, the work being done by the United States is excellent. And besides, I think it is working. It's bearing fruit because we see that also political prisoners are being released, something we welcome. And we also hope they will finally release all of the political prisoners. We are particularly concerned about the situation of Nahuel Gallo from Argentina, but as we see the positive evolution of the situation, we are hopeful that Nahuel will be able to be with us again in Argentina.
You know the reason why I asked. You flew to Oslo to support Maria Corina Machado when she won the Peace Prize. And do you still support her to be, or her candidate, Edmundo González, to be the president of Venezuela?
A ver, la situación es que lo que hay que
The thing we need to understand is that over the course of the stabilization process, any alternative,
la propia fuerza del régimen,
actually the force of the regime indoors will make anything fail otherwise. So the way I see it, the approach taken by the United States to deal with the situation is the right thing to do, the right way to go at this time. And, well, when it comes to rebuilding for democratic transition, it'll be the time to make perhaps other decisions and see how progress can be made towards democratization in Venezuela. I mean, of course, I do greatly appreciate and I'm fond of Maria Corina, who's a great friend and defender of liberty, but we need for this process to be successful. We shouldn't be too hasty and, as a result, finally going backwards.
And you still talk with Machado, and you're still in contact with her.
Oh yes, I'm in contact with her. We are friends.
Let's look at the economy. When we came here last year, you had already brought inflation down from 300% to 80%. Now it's at 30%. You've had a good year in terms of the trade deficit. The economy's growing. There are two questions, though, always come back. And the first is the currency. As you know, you are a free marketeer. You believe in free currencies. And the question is, when will you let the peso go free? And just to be really clear, the peso going free, you have broadened the band, but a free currency, you know as well as I do, means without any controls or FX bans. When does that going to happen?
Well, the first thing we need to understand is that when you come into office and need to run a country, it's not that you start from scratch. You need to obviously face history, and Argentina bears a very bad history on its shoulders. Argentina has removed 13 zeros from its currency. It has had 3 hyperinflations without a war. So there is a primary problem regarding the currency in Argentina, and that is the mechanism by which economic agents form expectations. If we were to work with a traditional rational expectations model, like the one we've all studied, we have so much celebrated Robert Lucas Jr., well, so much so, you know, I've named 2 of my 4-legged children after him. So you can imagine.
Do they bark at you every day that you do not set the currency free?
No, digamos, o sea, no los he visto todavía ladrar por eso.
I haven't heard them bark because of that.
No, porque además tengo versiones mías muchísimo más.
Besides, I have even much more libertarian versions of me. But I would like to note that under normal pressure and temperature conditions, so to speak, the price level in the economy would be governed by the money amount. And the exchange rate is one more price in the economy. Strictly speaking, we have set the money amount. This was in mid-2024. And what we are getting to feel now is the effect, the hangover effect after the monetary disaster of the previous administration, which printed money in an amount equivalent to 28% of GDP, and all the more so during the last few months before they left office to win the election. You know, this is the sort of sequence that prices follow that I'm going to explain. Let's suppose you have a fall in money demand that leads to a leap in the exchange rate, and that leads to an increase in the price of tradables, then in wholesale prices, then retail prices, and then wages, of course. If you have spent almost 90 years with that sort of dynamic, it's quite likely that people will think that if the exchange rate goes up, then the prices will go up too. So I won't get angry because of the way people form their expectations, because, I mean, they've been proven right for 90 years. So what we are trying to do is to understand that people can build expectations that way, and we understand that volatility in the exchange rate can translate into price volatility. Let's suppose you have a change in relative prices and tradables become more expensive. Or perhaps there is a deterioration in the terms of trade and the exchange rate goes up. what will happen then? Prices will go up. So you will see a mismatch between the price level and the money amount, and the economy will slide into recession. We understand the problem of volatility. So the exchange rate within the band is free. It is free. Within the band, it is free. And the bands only serve the purpose of showing to the people that the exchange rate will not be just any exchange rate. So then they learn how to float and they lose the fear. So that's the role of bands, to limit the volatility.
But when do you think this year you will be able to say you have learnt, you have discovered what that freedom is like, now try it properly and float, let's float the peso? What is the timing?
Desde mi punto de vista, ese momento llegará en el momento en que nosotros
point of view, that will be when we've finally cleaned up the money overhang. We have had this money overhang because of the hangover of previous monetary policy, also due to the capital controls that were put in place in the past, and also as a result of the price controls. Since we have set and fixed the money amount and we only now print against new demand, at one point local inflation will converge towards international levels, which means that at that point you have managed to clean up the money overhang and will be in a position to let the peso float freely without any sort of trouble, because along the way the agents will have learned. And if there is exchange rate volatility and they want to translate that into the domestic prices, they will have to face Menga's worst face. They will have no demand and will have
Can I ask you,
to deal with it.
The other big test, and it's a fairly simple question, is the international loan markets. You have raised money at home, domestically, but as you know very well, when your predecessor defaulted on the foreign bonds, and so the question's very specific. When will you go and raise money in New York or outside Argentina?
A ver, nosotros en rigor,
strictly speaking,
digamos, el tema de conseguir los fondos, la
raising
verdad es que lo
money,
único que nosotros deberíamos necesitar en principio
all we
sería solamente
should
rodear
need would just be to roll over as a general framework, because Argentina has zero deficit. In fact, the amount related to interest is paid by Argentina out of surplus. That's the first point. And through the Tax Innocence Act, we hope to really boost and develop the domestic capital market. Therefore, our need to resort to funds in foreign markets will be less and less. In the worst of cases, perhaps we would only be going out to international markets to secure the rollover. And besides, given Argentina's fundamentals, we think that paying a surplus rate or with country risk at 550 basis points, we think that is clearly not in line with our fundamentals. So since we have a very low debt to GDP ratio, because most of the debt is within the public sector, and we have achieved fiscal equilibrium, we will need less and less access to capital markets aside from the rollover. And with the development of the local market, we'll be able to pay and bring down the exposure. It's not something that, given our fiscal performance, should be a great concern. I would be worried not to have large enough Argentina.
Last year, you famously got a $20 billion swap line from the US, a big success. When you got it, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said that you had committed to, as he put it, to getting China out of Argentina. And you have always been very critical of China, but as you know, China still has a space station in Argentina. You still have a swap line with China. What does getting China out of Argentina mean to you?
In my view, what Scott Bessent said is well in line with the thinking of the United States administration, and this is a matter related to geopolitics. The United States does trade with China. And the way we see it, China is a great trading partner. It means a lot of opportunities for us to expand markets. So that is not any source of conflict. When the geopolitical time comes, do you have any doubts as to where Argentina stands?
China doesn't have a space station in the United States, the last time I checked. It does have a space station in Argentina.
Eso no está probado.
Well, that's not proven.
Well, China doesn't. I will ask President Trump whether the Chinese have a space station there. But in general, you know, when you were a candidate, you were very critical of the Chinese.
But
vamos a poner estos temas.
Let's put it this way. I'm president for 47.5 million Argentines, and I make the decisions that best favor the interests of the Argentine people. So part of that is the fact that Argentina, which is a very closed country, the most closed country in the world, given its GDP per capita, Argentina should have a trade to GDP ratio of a little over 90%, and it only has 30, strictly speaking 28 if you want to be accurate. Consequently, my plan is to open up to the EU, to EFTA, to the United States, and to China. I want an open economy. And if you look at the weight of the Chinese economy in the world, you will understand that I need to trade with China. Or look at the evolution of India. I need to trade with India. Well, and that's what I'm working on, to make Argentina definitely a more open country.
On the subject of trade agreements, you have a trade agreement with the US. When do you expect that to be signed?
We are ready to sign. We are working on the fine detail. We will have good news soon.
And the other one is Mercosur, which I remember you were somewhat critical of, but that is the Southern American trading bloc, which I know you think could be even freer than it is, but it's just done a deal with the European Union, which I think you support. But do you worry about the effect that could have on Argentine industry, or when it opens up the field with Europe?
When you design policy, and that was the central pillar of my presentation yesterday, my address in Davos. You see, you design based on ethical and moral values. So please explain to me why you would justify a situation where Argentines, or most Argentines, need to pay more for goods they could get more cheaply. Because it's false that also destroys jobs. That's one of the big lies of Keynesian economists, who are actually ruining the whole planet. Whatever they touch, they break. But when you open up the economy, there are products that will be cheaper, and you might lose jobs here, but that lets individuals spend less money. For example, in Argentina, you used to pay $40 for a T-shirt when it's actually only $5. And the money you save, you will spend elsewhere in another sector. You will create jobs in another economic sector that people are interested in, and this will lead to higher productivity. So when you open up the economy, you will see a reallocation of resources, but there will be productivity gains due to greater division of labor and higher specialization. Otherwise, if the protectionist argument were true, one day we would decide to close up Argentina. I will borrow an example from my brilliant, excellent, wonderful deregulation minister. That's taken from one of his books. I used to read him. I used to always be a big fan of Federico Sturzenegger. So he said, okay, so let's close up Argentina, and then narrow it to the province of Buenos Aires, and then further down to the city of Buenos Aires, and then to Palermo, which is just one district, and then it will be just a couple of blocks. And the end result of this will be full autarky. You will live all by yourself. What will your life be like? Miserable, because you'll have to make your own shoes, your own socks, your own suits, your own ties, your own shirts. How do you think you're going to live? badly. So trade creates a division of labor that leads to increasing returns, leads to productivity gains, and to well-being. This is why more open countries are wealthier. And Argentina is the most closed country, so we have a lot to do.
That was a very eloquent defense of free trade, which I should point out not enough other people do. But next door to you, you have Brazil, where I think it'd be fair to say there is a much more Keynesian approach with your friend, or not that friend, President Lula. He's up for election this year. What mending that relationship with Brazil, is that a priority, or do your dogs just bark every time you mention him? Are you going to call one of your dogs Lula?
Jamás le daría el nombre.
I would never call my dog anything left-wing. I really love my dogs too much for us to insult them. This is why they have all been named after liberal economists. Murray Rothbard, Milton, for Milton Friedman, Robert for Robert Lucas Jr., and Robert again for Robert Lucas Jr., and Conan, which is the barbarian warrior. That's the original dog. But apart from that, we have an adult relationship. I mean, this is not some kind of ideological or paper-based battle. In the middle, we have the lives of millions of human beings. So we continue to advance, but we have really given a lot of a boost to Mercosur for it to be more flexible and dynamic. Signing the deal with the EU took 25 years' time. That's a very long time. And the world of today needs more speed. It needs to move faster. So this is why we have also encouraged working with a lot more flexibility. We need to adapt. This is not a matter of whatever suits the bureaucrats. You know, those who just take up seat space and collect tons of dollars in order to do nothing. Because again, for a bureaucrat, the result means nothing, and the process is everything. And people need results. So we work in order to generate results for the people. So whatever helps improve trade, we will do. I will not be breaking anything. Whatever helps gain more trade, I will do. And if other countries decide to take other decisions, well, they're sovereign. It's up to them to do whatever they please. I work for the well-being of the 47.5 million.
If you look at Latin America, when we first met, you know, you were a sole voice on the right, if we call it that way. Since then, you've had Chile.
I was more lonely than Adam on Mother's Day. Now I have quite a few friends.
Yes, that's a very good parallel. Chile and since then, Chile and Bolivia. You have two friends.
And then Cain, of course, was
yes.
You know.
And but then you have Chile and Bolivia. And now we do have elections in Colombia and Brazil. Have you identified people there who you want to support to carry on the same kind of wave of reforms that you would hope to see change in Latin America?
La decisión de cada pueblo,
the decision is up to every people to decide whether they want to follow the path of socialism. You know, Thomas Sowell said, you know what is the best thing about socialism? That it sounds nice, but you know what the problem is? It always fails. So each society will awaken to the light of the ideas of freedom whenever it can. And I'm optimistic that they will become aware that the best thing they can do is espouse the ideas of freedom. And we can exemplify this with Argentina. We had inflation increasing 1% a day, so we were headed to 17,000%. We halted fiscal deficit, which was 5% of GDP. In the Treasury, we halted that in the first month. It would have seemed impossible, but it was not impossible for the world's best economy minister, Toto Caputo, and the best minister we've ever had in our history. In only 6 months' time, we fixed the quasi-fiscal deficit, and we also stopped the money amount, the printing money. Now we are looking at 24, 25, depending on whether you take the wholesale rates. So everyone was predicting a hyper recession, but Argentina reached a floor in April and then started to grow strongly. The latest figures show the economy growing at 4.2%. We have lifted 30% of the population out of poverty. 15 million people have been lifted out of poverty. What does this mean? That the free market works, that free market capitalism works, because those are the fundamentals I referred to yesterday in my Davos address. Free enterprise capitalism is not only just and efficient, but it also lets the economy grow more. And when you design policies on the basis of ethical and moral values, the Western values, you thrive, and you also enjoy social consensus because you're doing what is just, what is fair. One of the things is that
matar la justicia en el altar de la
can't
eficiencia,
possibly
ya sea
kill
la
justice on the
eficiencia
altar of
paretiana
efficiency, whether it be Pareto efficiency or the efficiency of Machiavelli's political calculus. This is why I said yesterday that Machiavelli is dead and we need to bury him, because what we are proving is that when you design policies on the basis of ethical and moral values, and when you do what is just, not what best suits the political rubbish people who work only on the basis of political speculation, that's how you gain support. We got 41% of the vote, a 17% lead over Kirchnerism, which in a general presidential election would mean winning on the first round. And the latest surveys show that 62% of Argentines support free market economy. And you know what? It works, and it is only just.
President Milei, there are many things that you can defeat, but one of them, perhaps the most socialist things of all, is time, and we have sadly run out of it. Thank you very, very much for talking to us. Please, can you all, we have to get President Milei out very quickly, so can you stay in your seats, and then we will go out. Thank you.
Pero para mí es un placer.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Lee Gilmore, Global Head of Bloomberg Live.
President Milei. Ladies and gentlemen, I just need to reiterate, please do not leave your seats until the President has left this room. Thank you so much. Well, what a way to end our programming in this exceptional week in Davos. Firstly, I want to say thank you, a big thank you, to our sponsor, Hitachi Energy, for supporting this morning's tea. Thank you all so much for joining us. A massive thank you to all of our speakers and sponsors. We know this is a busy week, and the fact that you choose to join us here in Bloomberg House means a lot. We hope to see you here next year, Davos 2027. Put it in your diary. Safe travels home to everybody. Thank you.